The first speaker, and please make your way here when you can, is Kell. So Corey, take it from here, and Corey Kell, everybody.
Thank you, Mark. Thank all of you. Special thanks to Kell and Kay for making this happen. As I said, I'm Corey Kell, creator of Flat Earth Intel, and I recently came into the Flat Earth community around 2015. I started looking at Flat Earth, and I've been in the community ever since. It's a great community. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about using the sun. And one thing, and even Mark will identify this, he always mentions, he said, people don't get into Flat Earth because of the sun. He is absolutely 100% correct. It's because we don't know how to use the sun. We're not taught how to actually use the sun in our traditional education. So that right there should tell you something, that when they talk about the heliocentric model, they're not teaching you how to use the sun because it doesn't work with the heliocentric model. And I'm gonna show you how the sun actually works and how we can identify that the heliocentric model is an incorrect model, is a very bad geometric model. I'm going to play a video clip here. I don't know if you can hear it.
Many ancient cosmologies believed the Earth to be flat. Now, in recent times, images are shown in media and mainstream science. Then this guy comes along out of nowhere and redefines the entire process on testing Earth's shape to a high standard. In 2014, he's almost killed in a war zone of Afghanistan. His name is Corey Kell, a contractor and retired Army veteran. Finally, in 2019, Corey decided to test the shape of the Earth. Over a 4-day period, he created a 9-step geometric validation process called the 45-degree sector test. Simplistic in application, designed for military science live fire kill boxes. The math was simple. The summer sun always at 90 degrees to Earth using the 45-degree sector test design, which meant the sun had to be 45 degrees in height 3 hours for the globe model, prior to or after solar noon. The limit was set 45 plus 45 equaled 90. The limit testing commenced and the test results were in. The globe had suffered massive geometric failure in its orbital mechanics, failing 76 out of 133 tests for 57% failure rate. Even when given an advantage of high altitude and declination, the Earth was indeed flat. Be informed, understand the higher knowledge.
So that's just kind of a preview of what I'm going to talk to you about. And really, when we talk about using the sun, there's a lot of information that the sun can actually tell us. The shape of the Earth is just one thing. Military science really identifies it in determining the Earth's surface shape, but also uses it for navigation. And specifically, we're talking about aiming point references and position references. So it's very detailed. Military science has been using it for decades. And I referenced the book of Daniel. I believe we're in the end times because our knowledge is increasing, as you'll see throughout this conference. A little bit of the presentation outline, what I'm going to talk to you about, and I would ask that if you do have a question about something, take a picture of the slide. If you have a question about the slide, in question. Because I'm going to put out a lot of information at you. A lot of it might be new. First, there's a little bit piece on my biography. Then I'll talk about the 9-step geometric validation process. Military science, I'll explain what it is and how I designed it from military science to 45-degree sector test box. Then I'm going to talk about the sun sequence, the big picture overall. And then we're going to talk about what's called the right triangle of death. And this is really where we can provide evidence that the sun for the globe or the heliocentric model does not work. And then final comments by myself. A little bit about myself. I was in the United States Army and Field Artillery for 23 years. I transitioned into defense contracting. I obtained a Master Gunner certification through the 18th FA Brigade at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And then after that, I went into defense contracting for about 14, 15 years. And again, I've been all over the world. I created the Flat Earth Intel website, .com website in March of 2021. I've authored several books, one on defense contracting. The other came out in 2023, which is called the Sun and Earth Modern User Reference Guide. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And I performed 133 geometric tests on Earth's surface shape from both sides of the terrestrial Earth. These are the areas when we talk about testing. I'm going to talk to you about extensive testing, not just going out there one day and doing a test, but we're talking about extensive testing to provide evidence on the shape of the Earth. I named these operations Operation Resolute Time 2020. I did it in Kabul, Afghanistan, in a war zone, probably the first time that's ever been done. It was at high altitude, right at 6,000 feet above sea level. The globe model, out of the 87 tests that were conducted, the globe model failed 50 of those tests for a 57% failure rate. That is a massive geometric failure rate. Testing at high altitude gives the globe model a major advantage, and if it can't help it with a major advantage like that, that's a really poor geometric model. Flat Earth, when we applied those same measurements, Flat Earth passed all testing at 100%. That's the standard. That's what you're looking for, something that's 100%. Then in Operation North American Sun over a 3-year period, and these are during the summer sun seasons up in the northern hemisphere. They did 46 tests. The globe model failed 26 of the tests for a 56% failure rate. And Flat Earth again passing all testing. This is from the other side of the Earth. And the significance of this is what I applied what's called declination. I wanted to see the adjustment of declination would have on testing. It didn't help the globe. Again, the globe is a very poor geometric model. The 9 steps, I'm not going to dwell too much on the 9 steps, but we need to identify what this process is. And as I've done in my military career and in defense contracting, the method of learning is really step-by-step is the best way if you're trying to teach somebody about a process. Whether you're going to actually do the test yourself or you just want more information in the discovery process, you need to know the steps and why they're in that sequence. Sequence is very important. From step 1 to gathering up the equipment required, step 2 to your location, where you're doing the testing on Earth, step 3, the sun survey point, which is a critical step. This brings accountability into the process. In other words, this is positioning. We're talking about positioning and where you're going to start testing the Earth's surface using the sun. Step 4, the orientation setup, we call it the OS. And then step 5, you're going to orient or aim our directional OS station at the sun. Our first reading will be at a westerly, and then our following day will be at the easterly. Step 6, there are 2 timing methods. Initially, when I brought this information out, Flat Earth Community was some of the first folks who contacted me. I left out one of the timing processes called the sun clock. Why would I do that? I set it up as kind of a trap to trap mainstream science because they're going to come sniffing around. And you have to, when you bring up a process, if you make it too airtight, they're not going to challenge you. So you have to show or give them a little wiggle room. So I left that door open to invite science to come in. And lo and behold, they did. I had a professor of science who teaches at a California college university. We had a 5.5-hour conversation via the web. And we had a very good discussion. It was a very eye-opening experience for him. As I said, that's step 6. Step 7, you're actually measuring vertical angle, or what vertical angle is, just simply measuring the height of the sun. Then the test box worksheet and the right triangle, we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then step 9, you record all the data from your test data. Probably one of the biggest things that both communities, the Flat Earth community gets a better idea when we talk about the sun is always 90 degrees to Earth. And the best method to do this, I call it the lollipop method. In other words, the sun is like on a stick, like a lollipop. The sun is always 90 degrees to Earth in the summer sun season. No matter if you're talking flat Earth, which the sun on the left side there, it orbits over the top of the flat Earth. For the globe tilts and then the globe spins. And I've had some folks come at me and say, well, Corey, I don't believe in the 90 degree angle that you're talking about. That's just not true. Oh, so really? So what you're telling me is that you don't believe in the equator, the Tropic of Cancer, and the Tropic of Capricorn, which are on your model. The reason that they're there is because the sun is 90 degrees. The globe just tilts, and it draws a circle around that model, for that model. So now you have people within the globe community, and some very high up people, that don't understand the geometry. And that's a major failure in what? Our education system. They learn the heliocentric model by regurgitating. But when you bring something like this to them, even at the college level, professor level, they don't know it. They simply don't know it. And I will tell you this because that 5.5-hour conversation I had with that professor of science sent me a 2.5-minute video and he said, Corey, this video is just for you. Hey, I'm all about that. First time anybody ever sent me a 2.5-minute video, and this is on the shape of the Earth. And I'm looking at this digital shape of the Earth and see how it spins, and I'm looking at all those rings of latitude, all those circles. And I'm thinking to myself, this guy has not a clue about geometry. But I'm going to teach him. I'm going to show him something he's never seen. Now, and this is what I'm talking about, even science agrees that when we talk about the rings of why the 90-degree position, the Tropic of Capricorn in the south, the equator, and the Tropic of Cancer in the north, this is from sciencenote.org. The sun is directly over those latitude rings. So again, it's the heliocentrists, they don't even know their model, some of them. And some of them are very well educated. And that's kind of shocking. They're out there teaching the young ones. What are they teaching them? They're just regurgitating. 2 methods of timing. As I said, when I mentioned I left that one method of timing as a trap, and eventually somebody from science came in snooping around. Time set was the first method I talked about. This is really about sun position, as you talk about, whether you're talking about the globe or the flat Earth model. We can break it down into sectors, as the video, the short little video that I previewed. Into 45 degrees is the best way to test it. Why? Because the sun has to be up at 45-degree angle up in the sky at height of 45 degrees. You want to get up above that interference zone. And when I talk about the interference zone, you get a lot of refraction and lensing 20 degrees and below. So you want to stay out of that zone. Military science even identifies it for survey operations using the celestial body of the sun. So you want to stay up out of that zone. And it's the easiest math breakdown. If you're at 45 degrees to the sun, or 3 hours from solar noon, you can only obtain a height of the sun, measured height of the sun of 45 degrees or less for that model to pass, and it just doesn't do that. The sun plot method, this is where we get into digital mapping and actual exact positioning. And I've had some people come at me and they want to change the digital map. Good luck with that. Because military science is decades ahead of you. They're already positioning through digital mapping a position on ground that they use for survey using a celestial body and putting artillery round over 20 miles away on target. I challenge anybody out there to get anything that's a higher technology and a method that somebody's life depends on it for accuracy. You're just not going to find it. It's not there. And I've had people in the science community contact me and say, Corey, I can't come out. I believe in the flat earth, but I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job. They're afraid of the ostracization. I know, they email, they contact me. So again, there's the 2 methods, and then the digital method is the sun plot method. We can actually plot a position to where the sun's going to be, its location within the tropics on Earth. And I'll give you a better diagram. And this is a diagram. When we look at the sun plot method, from the OS, and this is where we set up our sun survey point, our exact start point position, all we do is we use what's called a marks device and a compass. And we go online from solar noon, and we just measure that azimuth out. We can then figure out the azimuth from up in the north all the way to the equator during the sun's summer season. So we can figure it out, whether it's easterly or westerly. And we can figure out, or we can use those azimuths then to measure the sun when it comes into position. So it's very easy. It's 91 days in, 91 days out, 1 day at the equator. Same thing in the south, 91 days in, 91 days out, 1 day at the equator for 365-day coverage. And this again is when I've had people challenge me on the globe grid, can't get away from it, it's digital, it's exact positioning. So again, it's going to get harder on them. It's not going to get easier. I'd hate to be a professor of science right now in college, because all this information that comes out, you're going to have some young individual come up and they're going to get smoked and they're going to make them look stupid. It's going to happen because these folks that are learn to regurgitate stuff, that's all they know. So when you bring up something like this, they're lost. We need to understand some of the effects when we're measuring the height to the sun. The effects, we have the guide angle from the sun's 90-degree position. The closer we are to that elevated object, the sun in the sky, the higher our sun angle or the higher vertical angle measurement we're going to get. And that's just simply how it works when we measure. The farther we are away, the lower our vertical angle or the lower the high sun height is going to be. And that's just positioning. But we need to understand that because we need to understand that affects where our location is. Same thing with elevation. When we talk about elevation, the higher in elevation you go, the lower sun angle reading you should get. Sea level is the very base geometric form for the globe and the flat earth model. So for the 45-degree sector test at sea level, that reading should be 45 degrees or less sun height. And that's just simply how it works. That's technical, but that's the simple truth of it. This is the orienting station, and we'll talk just briefly about it. Two key elements when we talk about the orienting station. We want to be close to Earth's surface as possible, and that's a ½ meter. Without digging into the Earth, we want to be right at about ½ meter from Earth's surface, and that's what we do. We measure the platform height at a ½ meter, and then we want to make sure that we're plumb over the, we hang a string line where we plumbed over the orienting station from our sun survey point. Why? Because it's accuracy. And this all leads into what? Accountability. Something that heliocentric model lacks. When I designed this test, I designed it on simplicity in the step-by-step process, but also it's inexpensive. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars to test the shape of the Earth. You just simply don't. You don't need to go to Antarctica to figure out the shape of the Earth. You went to Antarctica to figure out the shape of the Earth, you went down the wrong road, my friend. U.S. military can tell you that, the ones who know. The real answer is up in the northern hemisphere. Why? It's a tighter orbital path. If the Earth is actually flat, and it is, that's where it's going to show up. That's the hardest test for the globe model pass, up in the northern hemisphere, because it's got the tighter orbital path. We used what's called a digital protractor. And this is a very simple device. It's an angle finder. And when I tested it for accuracy, it came out the same measurement. You want to test for accuracy, this one, it advertises plus or minus 0.5 degrees or ½ a degree. There was no difference when I tested it and verified it. All you do is you simply look down that radial arm, the top guide, it's got a display window. You move that radial arm up, point it directly at the sun, and click the button. It gives you a simple readout. It tells you the degrees, what that height of that sun is in degrees right there in the window. Very simple piece of very inexpensive. It's about $16, I think, when I bought it. Vertical angle, what I talked about before, it's just simply measuring the height of the sun. One thing we need to understand about measurements, you'll hear the term mils and degrees. Military science uses mils because we need to be far more accurate. So the breakdown for mils there are 17.8 mils in 1 degree. So the mil breakdown is very small. They're called milliradians. We call them mils for short. Vertical angle, that's all it is measuring the height of something. And all we're doing is we're measuring the height of the sun. And based on that, we can tell whether or not the Earth is a globe or if it's a flat surface. This is what it looks like. This is during Operation Resolute Time. Measuring a ½ meter from Earth's surface shape. This is an easterly reading time in July. 0900 was 50.1 degrees at high altitude, right at 6,000 feet. That's massive geometric failure for the globe. Again, this is what it looks like, the orienting station, very simple. I used a piece of plywood bottom that's so you can shift the orienting station very easily. You can shift it as you come onto the sun. And all you're doing is you're aiming the digital protractor arm right at the sun, click the button and read it. That's it. That's how simple it is. And I had that gentleman, Peter Jorgiel, in the community. He came up to me and he said, "Corey, he said, I got this globe right here. I want to know why it doesn't work with your test." And I said, "Because it's not a digital. You got a ball. It's not accurate. It's cut and pasted on a ball, so it's not accurate." And he goes, "Well, I did the test." I said, "What did you get?" He said, "I got 52 degrees from, I think it was Lexington, Kentucky." And I said, "Well, that's a fail." I said, "The reason it's called the 45-degree sector test is because you have to have 45 degrees or less for the globe to pass." So he said, "You mean I did it right?" I said, "You did it right." So again, it's learning how to do the process and learning why we use digital and the two methods. The best time to use time set is during the summer solstice. There's very little difference in the orbital rotation when it comes back around. The sun a lot of times will come right to the exact same position for solar. We need to understand sun position or sun clock time. They are just one and the same. Timing. There are 8 45-degree sectors. We can break that down from solar noon at the 12 o'clock position. We do the westerly, which would be at the number 15 sun at 1500 hours. And then prior to the following day at 0900 if our solar noon is at 12 o'clock. Some solar noon may be at 1, might be 12:30. Wherever your position is on Earth, this is just using an example. And this is time set. And again, 24 hours and 1 sun clock day. There are 8 45-degree sectors for a 360-degree coverage. Whether you're talking about flat Earth or the globe model, they are one and the same. One and the same. Now think of it as 3, 4, 5, or 3 hours equals 45 degrees. And really what you're doing, and I don't advertise this a lot, but when you do this actual test, or whether you're learning how to do this test, you're learning Orbital Mechanics 101. This is Orbital Mechanics 101 and actually 201. So it's built in. And again, this is what we should have learned in our traditional education. We should have learned how to do this. It's a very inexpensive test. It's very simplistic. Once you learn the step-by-step method, it's not hard. It can be taught to children. And again, we look at the sun and where it's located for the globe model. It's why we use the sun, because it's all about positioning. That sun is the center celestial body. If you're said to be orbiting that center celestial body, it doesn't get any better for that, for aiming reference or for positioning. Same thing on the flat Earth model. The sun is 90 degrees and orbits over the top. That is prime positioning reference once you understand that. And again, military science has been using it for probably near a century. They've got it figured out. And that's why we use the sun. Again, just a simple breakdown. And what we're doing is we break that globe down. I broke it down into 45-degree sectors. And what we're doing is we're testing sector 1, which will be the westerly, just to the west of us, and then that following day, we'll test the easterly sector, sector 8. And all you do is, once you get your solar noon position using a compass and a marks device, and I'll show you what that looks like, once you do that, it's game on. You're going to get a terminal decision, a terminal answer, whether the Earth is flat or whether it could be a ball. And that's what happened to the professor. When I asked him, I said, if you're 45 degrees to the sun, what's the maximum vertical angle you can have, Professor? Won't answer. Why? Because he's faced with a terminal decision point. And they don't want it, some of them, they don't want to answer that. So I kept pushing that point through our whole conversation. He wouldn't answer. And then I said, is it too technical for you? And he said, please don't say that. So I had to push this button a little bit. 3 weeks later, he emailed me, and he said, yeah, it's important to know. How about that? So again, it's what they didn't learn, is where you can, where they run into problems. This is what it looks like on ground, Sector 1 and Sector 8. There you have the marks device, which is just a simple piece of wood with a hole cut in the middle. And then we align this on magnetic north using a compass. We put a cross level on there and we get solar noon. That's a picture during the Operation Resolute time. You can see that shadow line is right down the center line of that hole. Now all we're going to do is put a marker, a plug in the ground from that position, and that is known as our sun survey point. From there, then we can start taking our readings to the sun. And again, that's huge accountability in the entire process. Something that is lacking in a heliocentric model and what we're taught about the globe model. And again, that's just simply how it works. Very simple methodology. The sun survey point, and this was another area of contention with the professor. He didn't want to really talk about it. Why? It's accountability. In other words, once you put that survey marker point in, it's game on. We're going to find out real quick whether you're measuring from a flat surface or a curved surface, especially during the summer sun season. In place prior to orienting OS setup, known as a start point. It's simply the start point where you're going to start testing them. You need to know that and know how to do that. Creates accountability in the process, in the setup. And this is the gold standard. That's why it's highlighted in gold. Once in place using vertical angle, VA verifies the globe and FE model sun position at its said size, at its said distance, based on the model's surface, angle, or geometric shape. Folks, it doesn't get any better than that. That's why it's the gold standard. And that's what the heliocentrists avoid right there. Everything within that line, they avoid. Allows for verification of timing based on the survey marker. You can check timing. Again, two methods. And again, this is all based on orbital mechanics. You can use two methods or one method. And then the ability to check the globe grid system and magnetic system. You can check the variance. Once you put that line on the ground, you can check variation. So again, you can do a whole lot with this process other than checking the shape of the Earth. And again, this is just what it looks like. And all you're doing is measuring across that sector at that time or at that sun plot azimuth. That's just simply how it works in the breakdown. And their position on true north. And there are a lot of people don't know, but there are three norths. There are true, magnetic, and grid north. Some people ask me and say, well, how do I know I'm 45 degrees at 3 hours or during the designated sun plot? So when we look at the globe, for the globe model, because you are dealing with circles, okay, and these circles are all at what? Sea level. These are rings of latitude. When you talk about 3 hours, when you talk about westerly or easterly, that globe has squares or a scale. And for this example, each one of those squares is 10 degrees. So across that scale, you are at a 10-degree angle from one end to the other. To get to 45 degrees, we got to do what? We got to be 4.5 squares. So 4.5 squares from our OS position, we are then 45 degrees. That's how we know. And again, that's what even Professor of Science did. But that's how you get there. And this is what they lack in their entire process. They'll show you movies and videos and pictures all day long. Okay, let's get down to some details. And again, this is easterly and westerly. This is how we know we're 45 degrees for the globe model. On the flat Earth model, you're at 0 degrees because what? You're on a flat plane, flat base. You have to know the limit. And again, when I pressed the professor during our whole conversation, I said, what's the limit? Do you know the limit? No answer. And it's just a simple math. If you're 45 degrees to the sun, that means your sun height cannot exceed 45 degrees because that sun is always 90 degrees. 90 is the limit. It's just simply how it works. It's simple addition. That's it. This whole process, you need to do a little addition, a little subtraction. That's it. There's no extensive math that you need to use. The entire process is very simple. It's step by step, but again, if you want to actually do the test and learn about it, it's all there for you, whether each process. And again, that's just simply understanding the limit. Vertical angle, there's a scale. As you go up in scale, Once you go above that limit, that 45 degrees for the globe model, that's all flat Earth. It is all flat Earth zone. So if you're getting reads 46 or higher for the 45 degree sector test, that is flat Earth only. You can't achieve that for a globe model. And we'll show you the exact measurements and the exact result. We can break it down to millimeters if you want, but we're going to keep it in nice round figures of miles. Got to know that limit from 9 to 10 a.m. in the morning and then 3 to 4 p.m. in the afternoon. And again, there's a terminal line for the globe model when you do the 45 degree sector test. That is the terminal line. Anything above that, that is flat Earth only. So if you're getting vertical angle measurement of 50 degrees or like Peter Jorgill at 52 degrees, that's a fail for the globe model. Massive failure. It's just simply how it works. You can't obtain that. The test box, you're going to hear me talk about the test box. And this is how I developed it from military science. There are defining limits. And when we look at the test box 1 is what happened. Test box 2 for the globe model is what should have happened and didn't at high altitude. Even at high altitude, it couldn't make it. Box 1 is what happened when I tested the Earth. And again, it's just simply about knowing sun position in our daytime sky. Military science, you heard me mention it. There's a huge definition for military science. This is a small breakdown of it. It's a much larger definition, but this is the meat and potatoes of it. And military science is the study and execution of military processes, institutions, and behavior, along with the study of warfare and the theory and application of organized cohesive force. It is mainly focused on theory, method, and practice of producing military capability in a manner consistent with national defense policy. Military science serves to identify strategic, political, economic, psychological, social, operational, technological, and tactical elements necessary to sustain the relative advantage of military force. Woo! That is some sandwich. When we talk about military science, people say, well, I don't know what military science is. It touches all aspects of your life, whether you know it or not. The two areas that I pulled out this methodology were highlighted in yellow: technology and method. And what they call this process, this is called the military decision-making process, or what's called MDMP. I think they actually have a new term for it now. But I pulled out geometry, vertical angle, and survey operations using the sun and stars. So that's what I pulled out and how I developed and designed it. Like Army units, military science, just as Army units must validate their readiness for war through evaluation and testing of units' wartime mettle, we can validate the shape of the Earth using the sun. And when I use the term validate, you're talking a different language. We're not talking theory. We're not talking maybe. We're talking about validation. In other words, we're actually talking about test data, what shows up. We're talking about extensive test data. Again, when we do that validation process, that's very important. Trust but verify. Trust but verify. And again, mission for metal, they call it metal in military science. That's just what a unit, what their mission is, what they do. Each task that supports it. What you'll find, and Mark Sargent's had a lot of folks from the military come in, subject matter experts. And again, you're talking about people that have what? Extensive field experience. There's no substitute for it. You can't get around it. That field experience, again, when I talked to that professor of science, if all you learned is how to regurgitate something, and he was doing the sticks and shadow test for the shape of the Earth, which is wrong in so many geometric ways on testing Earth shape that it shouldn't even get honorable mention, but it's just bad geometry. And but somehow the heliocentrists want to stick to it. But again, it's real world application. In other words, we're talking about somebody's life that depends on your accuracy and your technology and your methodology working. And that's the big difference. We talk about when I built this process, this was based on solid foundation and fundamentals, all the way from the very base, which deals with survey operations, celestial survey, live flight, gunnery, knowing your limits, calculations, triangulation. That base you work up into the sun using a sun plot, accountability, vertical angle, line of sight, line of measure, testing and setup, knowing your location, observer orientation, altitude. This is all orbital mechanics. It's all geometry. When you talk about the shape of the Earth, you're talking geometry. You can't get away from that, especially if you're going to talk about something that you want to verify. And again, this is all, when I talk to folks about higher knowledge, some of it is higher knowledge. You shouldn't be afraid of higher knowledge. Some people are afraid of higher knowledge because they're afraid of the answer that it brings. Don't be afraid of it. It's there for you if you want to learn it. And that gets us to what at the very top, why we're all here. The Truth Expo conference. It's all about the truth and how we get there. The test box, I designed it from a kill box. This is a kill box on the impact area. It's just defining limits. If you're shooting an artillery round, in some cases over 20 miles, you can't see where you're shooting it from the gun into the impact area. You have to know where that round is going. If you don't know where that round's going, you're in trouble. You have to know exactly where that round is going to impact. And that's just simply limits. Designing a box. And actually the test box is a sacred geometric form, and it's designed as the cube. And the two geometric forms that are sacred are the triangle and the cube. Why? Because they're all about truth. They're all about defining limits. They only know one thing, truth. Not fiction, not theory, but truth, in fact. The test box, again, just a simple breakdown of it. When we look at sun position 1 from our orienting station, our observer, we get our manual linear alignment, not underneath the sun, but on line with it at 90 degrees from our sun survey point. Then at 3 hours later, or the time set method 3 hours later, we'll take a measurement at sun position 2. And that, for the globe model, has to be 45 degrees or less for it to pass that test. Same thing for the sun plot. We can measure an azimuth to our sun position based on our azimuth, our direction, to the sun's location in the tropics. It's just simply how it works. And then it's a terminal decision or a terminal answer. Either it passes or it doesn't. So when we put the globe model in, we start from our sun position 1. We put the globe into the test box. We get our manual linear alignment. Our sun moves to sun position 2 at 3 hours for the designated sun plot azimuth. We take that vertical angle measurement. And then we come to find out at 133 tests, the globe model failed 76. Out of 133 for a 57% failure rate. That is massive geometric failure. When we apply those same readings to the flat Earth model, we put it in the test box. The flat Earth passes at 100%. That's the standard. Simply put, 100%. It doesn't get any easier than that. Military science, a lot of folks don't know about it. Celestial survey. I learned a lot of celestial survey in it when I was up at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. We used the sun and the stars. We call them sunshot in the daytime or star shot at nighttime. 3 methods of lay or orienting are orienting angle survey, magnetic, grid magnetic, or hasty astro. That's part of hasty astro, using the sun and the stars. And what this is triangulation. This is how we have to address refraction and lensing. So this is how we can address refraction and lensing at these higher angles. In other words, there's no effect to it. Military science does it daily. And what they do is when they come into position, they use these survey methods. The lay circle will come into position, then the safe circle will come in after. They'll use two different means of laying. In other words, the safe circle will use one lay setting. The safe circle will use a different one. So they use independent means, and then what they're going to do is they're going to turn an angle on each other. They're going to look at each other in their circle. And they have to be within 10 mils. Remember when I said the breakdown for 1 degree is 17.8 mils, so it's less than a degree. They have to be less than a degree And if they bump within 10 mils, that's good, that's safe data, then they can use that survey. That verifies survey. That verifies there's no what? No refraction and no lensing. That is verification. Military science has been using it for decades. And again, that's just simply how it works. And when we talk about circles, we break those circles down. And we have a saying in artillery that if you see red, you read red. And what we'll have is, like I said, the lay circle on the right will look at the safe circle on the left, and they'll read a scale number that they see on their base of their survey device. The scale on the right for this example reads 1600 mils. The circle on the left, the safe circle, will look down. He said, I see red, I read red, 1600 mils. You are 0 mils. At that point, there's no refraction, there's no lensing. That's just simply how it works. And that is proof. That is hard evidence. Army's been doing it for decades. Marine Corps does it as well. Marines call it a mag check. The Army calls it bumping. And again, this is how military science addresses lensing and refraction. Now I say 20 degrees, but really your lensing and refraction occur about 10 to 12 degrees to the ground, at the horizon. That's where you get that thick lensing. And if we look, we can see this is at sunrise, sunset. You can see that the sun and the heliocentric model, all models is 1 degree. It's 1 degree in size. This is close to 3 degrees or even larger. And this is where you would get that difference. That difference in when you bump or when you do alternate methods of lay, this is where that would show up because that sun is bigger. And again, that's just simply how it works. And that's why I tell you, don't use it at sunrise or sunset. Again, military science proven methods show no effect at the higher angles. No effect, lensing and refraction. Using 2 independent methods of lay, that's triangulation. That is triangulation. And again, I said the U.S. Army, they call it bumping. The Marine Corps, they call it a mag check. And again, military's been doing it for decades. Just simply how it works. Every now and then I'll get an email from somebody from the military. This guy was Air Defense Artillery. He looked at one of my videos. He said, sir, I enjoyed your video. It was a Hawk missile fire control whose crew enjoyed a direct hit live fire off of Onslow Beach, North Carolina, January 1987. My mathematical memories of using the M2 anti-circle was refreshed and brought back memories at Fort Bragg, 3688 Airborne. I have come to the same conclusion that you have and continue to dig for scientific validation. Good luck on that. Your presentation, although advanced, leaves little doubt in your mind the conclusions you have drawn. I'm also in alignment with the closed earth model and had not thought of the conductive nature of salt water, but makes sense. Look inside any Bible, see the Hebrew version, earth and pillars. Even if the Bible is allegoric in nature, everything you need to know is in Genesis chapter 1 through 6. Right on, Stephen, right on you are. And again, when he's talking about salt, I mentioned salt. It's all part of the electric system. That's why the ocean is salt. You're in an entire, this whole earth model is an electric system. So that just helps process that electric, it's conductive in nature. And that's why you have, why the salt is in the water there. The other science that uses vertical angle, it's not military science only, but civil engineering. And this simple example is bridge height. Standard semi is 13 feet 6 inches high. That bridge, that underpass needs to be that height for that semi to pass through it. That's a what? That's a limit. That's a defined limit. If you try to go under a bridge that's 12 feet 4 inches, you're going to damage that semi and damage that bridge. That's just, again, knowing the limit. So vertical angle, military science, civil engineering. The shape of the earth, why it's the big deal. And most people, they're going to go down 2 roads. 2 roads that you look at, the globe, the cosmic axis, the Big Bang Theory, and then the intelligent design created by the Bible, the flat earth model. And people say, well, Corey, you're wrong, man. The globe is in the Bible. It's right there. Really? Well, let's take a look at that. We want to take a look at it. Use the sun. The sun is the center celestial body. That's why we want to use it. Validates the model's orbital mechanics. That's what we're doing. We want to validate. We want to check its orbital mechanics. Exclude the one model through extensive testing. We're not talking about just going out and doing one test. We're talking about extensive testing, especially up in the north. Removes the long distance game piece off the board. This is important. If you provide solid evidence that the globe model fails, you've done what? You've taken out the long distance game piece. That also goes away because that supports that model. They need that long distance. So that takes out that model. Again, that's collateral damage of doing this test. Again, globe and evolution are tied together at the hip. So now you're getting a 3-for-1 sale. You're taking not only out long distance game piece, but you're taking out evolution, because it's all tied together. Evidence of creation of flat Earth by intelligent design by a creator who loves us. Pretty simple, right? The sun validates flat Earth. Sequence, what we're talking about. A lot of people, you don't need to be a biblical scholar or an astrophysicist to figure this out. Look at when the Earth is formed. It's there, like Stephen said in his email to me. It's right there in Genesis. It lays out the order, the sequence. You look at where on the globe, on the biblical model on the right side, heaven and earth are created first. We look at where Earth is formed. It's way down at the left, on the bottom, on the heliocentric model. Again, you got to know your sequence. So when I go down the highway, the interstate, I see these pictures of a Bible and a globe together, and I'm like, you just don't know your sequence. Very poor knowledge. The other thing we can look at where the sun and the stars are formed in both models. Again, you don't need to be an expert at it. It's all there for you. It's right there in the Bible. Pull this up. This is AI overview. AI overview will spit it out. Look at where the sun, moon, and stars are created at the very end in the biblical model, the flat Earth model. The sun and stars are formed before the Earth, out of sequence. So when you see a picture of the Bible of the globe, they just don't know their sequence. It's like baseball. Getting to first base. Orbital mechanics test is first base. If you're going to check and verify the model, and when we check and verify the globe model, we find that its orbital mechanics fail. In other words, you're out at first base. You're done. That's it. You don't even make it to the sky optics, the display system, the celestial bodies. Why? Because you can't pass an orbital mechanics check, a test. What does that leave? You look at a closed-in system. Basically a display system, that's what? It's a clock system, signs and seasons. Where does that tell us? I think it's in the Bible. Spells it out very clearly. That's second base. Then you're around third base, you're talking about gravity, electrostatics. There's some really smart folks that have designed that. One of them is here, Joseph. He's got one of the models. Zach Zabala does a lot of great work on electrostatics, if you haven't seen his stuff on gravity. The toroidal field and weather signs and seasons, third base and around now. Where do I think we're at right now? I think we're rounding third base coming home. That's where I think we're at in the community. We've got some really bright folks in the community. God bless each and every one of them. Vertical angle of the sun, and this is looking back from the sun to the earth. And this is the effect, vertical angle, when you measure the height of the sun. This is looking at it from the sun's point of view. When we measure that sun, that measurement has to be within the radius of the size of the sun. The sun, its size is given there. The radius is right at 400,000 miles and some change. That measurement, that vertical angle measurement for the 45-degree sector test, if you're 45 degrees to it, as shown as surface angle 45 degrees, then our VA, if we get a reading of 50.1 as an example, that total is 95.1. Remember, when you're doing that test, you're looking directly at the sun, center mass. That pulls you off the sun. So you're 5.1 degrees over, which is massive. That is massive. We use a test box worksheet just to do the simple addition. And all you're doing is 45-degree sector test on the bottom, the observer angle to the sun, and then the measured height to the sun, 50.1 degrees. Simply add those two numbers together. That number has to be smaller than 90 degrees or smaller for the globe model to pass. And it doesn't. It's 95.1. So now what do we do with that 5.1 degrees? We're going to go to a right triangle calculator. And this is what I call the right triangle of death. In other words, this is where it shows up. It's all fun and games till you get to the right triangle. What you're going to do is go to calculator.net. And again, it's just like operating a calculator. All you have to do is plug in two numbers. You clear all those fields out, that what you see before you, and you're going to enter in two areas of data. You're going to enter in the sun season, sun's distance in the heliocentric model for the globe, which is 94 million miles and some change, based on the sun season. And then angle A, you're going to add what you were over on your test. You were 5.1 degrees, you're going to add 5.1 degrees in that box. You're going to hit calculate, and it's going to give you the answer. That answer has to be smaller than the radius of the sun. In other words, it has to be within inside the sun. So it's like that test box is an impact area, it has to be within that area. So when we do that, 5.1 degrees over for our angle, that's the spread, what we call the spread. That answer is 8 million miles and some change. So that answer is way too big for the globe model to pass. Because what the sun size radius is 400,000 miles. So you're over right at 8 million miles. In other words, that's how far the heliocentric model, globe model is off. That's like you pointing one way, and the sun is over here. No, but really it's over here. No, it's not, it's right there. It's in the wrong position. And there's a lot of this is what the heliocentrists don't want to talk about. And that's why I said it's going to get harder. It's going to get harder for them. I would not want to be a professor of science right now, and especially in a college or university. It's going to get harder for you. Because they were taught to regurgitate one way. When you bring stuff like this, they have no field experience. So when you talk to them about, did you do a right triangle calculation? They're going to sit up there and go, a what? Deer in the headlights. Final comments? Like the professor, we will have that decision to make. And for some folks, that's a terminal decision. That's a terminal answer. You may not like it, but it's there. It gets to the truth. Some people don't want to know the truth. Method, evidence, extensive testing and results. Field experience, there's no substitute for it. Understanding higher knowledge, how higher knowledge can work for you in your understanding. Educate yourself. It's there for you. If you want it, it's there for you. You're going to see a lot of different presenters come up, and they're going to talk about a lot of great things. It's all there for you. God bless you. Testing the model's orbital mechanics using the sun. We want to use that to validate the Earth's surface. Shape of the Earth. And always remember, you are the blessing, not the sin. You can reach me. This is my contact information on YouTube, TikTok, on Rumble. I have an email, 2 emails. Please, by all means, feel free to contact me. My website, flatearthintel.com. I'm very approachable and easy to talk to. This concludes my presentation. A special thanks to Carol with a K, and thank all of you.